Hello, my name is Maria Bezubova and you're at my channel Fertilizers Jazz. Here we talk about events, trends, technologies in the world of fertilizers and agriculture. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and let's jazz! With today's video, we will wrap up the mini-series of quarterly market reviews and forecasts from the prominent market analysts. And today we will discuss phosphates market. In order to do this, I am happy to host again a super cool guest, Chris Vlachopoulos, markets editor for Phosphates at ICIS. I'm very glad to welcome you, Chris, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Maria. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for having me again. It's so interesting to be talking about the market and, following your channel quite a while. It's so great to have a voice like yours bringing industry people together. So thank you.
Thank you. Chris, I propose to start our chat with turning back a bit to the year of 2024 and look at its outcomes for phosphates. What was your key takeout, maybe key event that from your point of view shaped the market and formed the pace of 2024? And of course, that will be important for 25.
God, that's such a tricky question, isn't it? There's so much that happened during this year. It's kind of like
eventful year actually for all fertilizers, not only phosphates.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, urea has been very eventful, potash, but going to phosphates, I think, lots of interesting stuff. The most important players being China and India. I believe like one of the most interesting events for me was the Indian election, really. And even though that wasn't a direct sort of happening in the industry, it really was something that had knock-on effects in many ways, not least of which was the Indian subsidy situation and how that was a little bit unfavorable for importers. And, it's something that's come up time and again, really, in our conversations with market players. It's just a really tricky situation to navigate for importers. And I believe this may have been one of the main reasons that, we're hearing about the DAP stock situation in India being very unfortunate lately, despite the assurances, the multiple assurances from the Indian government and other industry bodies like the FAI. That was really something that affects availability in many regions. We're seeing other countries just look with a lot of interest toward India to see, are they going to be able to secure product? It would seem like the ending the year with quite a bit of low numbers of stocks, and the expectation is that a lot of countries might have difficulty procuring product because they're like, the main buyer of the world is low on stocks. They're going to have to turn to the market again. How does that affect us? Are we going to be able to secure product? It seems like capacity is not much of an issue, as far that's my understanding at least. So, we have evidence to suggest that Moroccan producers, reaching record production and, aspiring even higher for the year to come. But of course, there is the China card, which is out of the market. So I realize I didn't really answer your question. I touched on a lot, but hopefully that gives us a lot to talk about for the next few minutes.
Right, indeed. You are completely right. Fully agree. So many different things happening. You started with India, obviously the largest elephant in the room. So maybe let's continue with India in 2025. What is your expectation? Indeed, they purchased a lot during Q4, so they wanted to really make this deficiency as low as possible that they had. However, I don't think they really succeeded. So what do you see in Q1, how it will move? Because Q1 is the final quarter of Indian fiscal year, meaning that they will need to spend whatever they planned for the year. So how it will affect the purchases of DAP specifically?
Yeah, so we definitely expect them to be replenishing their stocks over the next few months. We understand that a lot of buyers are also already in discussions with producers in North Africa to secure product. Again, like last time when India procured a lot of DAP, there was this also like tacked on quantity of TSP for which Indians are, as I understand it, have very little appetite. But and there's all sorts of problems with TSP. It doesn't really play well with other fertilizers, as far as I understand it. It has some storage difficulties. I'm not sure it really addresses the soil needs for India. But nonetheless, OCP is quite keen to promote TSP quite a bit. But going forward, we really hearing those discussions going on. And there is some evidence to suggest that they have been below the historical level for closing stock. So again, though, I really hate to bring in more parts of this equation. It's just about to do with the subsidy level. Is the Indian government ready to revise that? Again, we have one elephant in the room, India, but there's another elephant in the room, China, which has recently closed off exports. With all these elephants in the room, I think we're going to have to get a bigger room. It's just a lot of equations to keep into account, a lot of factors. And with China, there's some evidence to suggest that China has already sort of concluded, they have a plan for the first quarter of 2025, and there's some indications that there isn't much to expect to come out of China for that period. That would affect availability of product for India, not critically, but that is another factor in the equation. And we prices have not really moved, which is kind of remarkable. Prices have remained remarkably stable for the last few weeks or months in India. How do prices move? Will India wait to see whether there is some movement in the prices before they do commit? I would suspect that that's sort of the secret hope in some chambers of the Indian government, that hopefully they might not have to move the needle for subsidies and just prices organically come down. Is that something that, can be sort of factored in with a degree of certainty? I think that's far from guaranteed. It's quite likely that prices do not move as substantially as some might hope. And then we're back here again, speaking again in Q2 and saying, you know what, the subsidy regime really isn't really up to speed with, the prices in the field, and importers are really struggling with this. And to my eyes, at least, that was the catalyst, really, the unfavorability of the subsidies that really disincentivized buyers from, taking the initiative, bringing in more product. And this has compounded through the course of the year to this situation where we're hearing, DAP stocks being uncomfortably low for the country. So the natural expectation is, yes, India will need to buy. I suspect there will be a little bit of a wait to see whether prices do respond. But with China out of the equation, perhaps we're looking at not as much traction as some might hope, is my personal opinion.
I see, I see. Thank you. You already mentioned that Indian government is kind of in talks with some government-to-government contract securing with Moroccan producer. Um, First of all, this is unusual because that is not something that is done regularly by them. Usually they just purchase on tender, which secure them the best price clearly. Do you think it is something that we can see now developing? I mean, this government to government type of contracting, because the prices didn't react as everyone in the market was expecting, lower into the moment when India wanted to buy. Do you think they're trying just to get the better pricing?
That's a really interesting question. I suspect that they're willing to try anything they can. If it ends up being cheaper than dealing with the subsidy regime, I suspect it could be something that they try, but it remains to be seen, really. But you're right to say it is kind of unusual to be in talks. But then again, the stock situation is unusual in and of itself. So maybe that's just a reflection. Necessity is the mother of invention. If you really need to make something work, you'll try anything you can. And it really is up to other parties as well to respond to that and see how they can what they can get out of it. But we're hearing that there's some talks ongoing between North African parties and the Indians, as well as some Russian parties who recently supplied India with MPKs and DAP. So, that's another interesting factor in the equation, the Russians, and, the fact that they're always there. Again, we're hearing that a substantial Russian producer, their new capacity is increasing, the record production. So there is product available to be sold. It's just a matter of navigating the tricky levies on their product. And of course, the extra challenges around transportation and long shipping times. But I suspect that is an interesting option available to the Indians, whether they, choose to take it or not. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it develops in Q1. One more interesting development that we saw in Q4 was Ethiopia, of course, and they called that significant tenders for supply of 2025 and the major one. To me, Ethiopia starts to be a significant player, similar kind of to India in urea, India in urea, in respect that it purchases large organized government tenders and supplies for the whole need, for the whole demand of the country. How this tender that happened in Q4 influenced market dynamics? What do you think? And how do you think emergence of such a buyer in general will affect like broader dynamics in 2025 in the market?
God, what an interesting question. Absolutely, I agree with you. Ethiopia is emerging as a big player and someone who has the potential of sort of upsetting the status quo a little bit in some ways. Yeah, so recently we had the tender for which China really stepped up, and they filled a lot of that demand in Ethiopia, and there is another one for December. Perhaps we should mention for our listeners that even though this is airing in 2025, our conversation is taking place before the closing date of the Ethiopian tender, so we might not know exactly what the offers and what the situation is. But if it's in China might not be able to step up in the way that they have so far because of course, of the ban, the so-called ban, I should say, the customs inspections halt for Q1. Um, Traditionally, the one entity that has really come in to offer product to Ethiopia has been North Africa, more specifically OCP. Uh, we're seeing a little bit of a distance recently from the Moroccans when it comes to the Ethiopian tender. I'm not exactly sure why. Perhaps there's some disagreements behind the scenes on grading and perhaps some logistics, but I would not rule them out for sure. Their capacity is robust, production is robust. They could step in, and we could be seeing some offers. Again, we've seen. Saudi Arabia step in to really come to the Indians and the Africans' rescue recently. Again, capacity is very robust. But you're absolutely right. These tenders, they're a little bit of a wild card. It's kind of like if you're trying to predict what's going to happen, it's something that, quantities are so significant that definitely could be providing a little bit of a surprise. And if you combine that with what we just mentioned about prices for DAP in India, well, if you have another party that's really thirsty for product, then does that really help the price come down? And on that note, I should mention Australia has been doing quite a bit of work, quite a bit of purchasing for their winter needs now. There's some evidence to suggest that they're mostly done. Um, but that again has been another destination like Ethiopia came up and siphoned quite a bit of product, which could maybe explain why prices may have not come down for the Indians. But absolutely, it's something to keep an eye out for. And even though we don't know quite yet what the outcome is, our listeners probably will when this comes out. That's a very interesting question. That very sort of challenging situation to factor in if you're someone who's trying to predict what the direction might be. Yeah.
Right, right. Thank you. Let's move to Europe now. This is the other market that was not usual in its behavior, let's say, during whole 2024, because the affordability was so bad for European farmers with all this weather collapses that happened, etc., etc. So their main phosphate season is over in Q4, and last time we discussed that because of this tough year, partially it will result, in skipping or significantly decreasing phosphate applications rate for European farmers. So, what is your evaluation? How was, in fact, the demand in Q4 in Europe, and what do you expect in Q1? Not the most important
The
season, of course, during
Of
the year.
course, of course. Yeah, it's exactly like you said, Maria. I think you covered it all. Demand has not been there, mainly as a fact as a consequence of the weather, as far as I understand it, as well as combined with some liquidity issues in some countries. We've seen offers of Lithuanian product recently, come in and sort of change the landscape a little bit with regards to price, but not substantially. Actually, something that we've seen be a bit of a factor as well has been the recent change, unfavorability with the exchange rate between the euro and the dollar. That's also been a factor for some European countries. Primarily, it's exactly like you said, it's been the weather and demand has just really not been there. And we were just getting into the discussions with industry players about, okay, what do you are they finally coming to, those decisions to commit? And right when we were sort of slowly seeing some movement, the holidays came, and
Yeah,
everybody is like, well, you know what? I'm just going to take some time and think about this. And um, demand has really not been seen on the nitrogen side more so than the phosphates. I think phosphates is for whatever reason, whether that's justified or not, is being seen as something that is perhaps a bit of an afterthought for some now, and whether they decide to skip or not. They sort of consider that they have the option to uh, see if they want to apply product, whereas with nitrogen, it's more like an automatic thought process where, it's more regularly sought out, in my experience at least.
right.
For Q1, looking ahead, it is possible that we see some movement actually, just because right before the holidays, we did see some interest and some inquiries being made. But overall, I would have to say it's not looking like a fundamentally different landscape. It's just something that we might see an uptick or a slight change in direction, but fundamentally the direction of the ship and the velocity is not very opportune right now.
I see.
So no, yeah,
I see. Yeah, let's hope that phosphate demand will grow for European market further during the year, and it will, bring some coverage of this deficiency that exists because of this, under application in 2024. But I think we will see it further, not in Q1, not during this first three
completely.
months.
And as I understand it, the same situation applies in Ukraine as well, with
Right.
demand remaining very subdued. It's just another expression of the same, another sort of incarnation of the same image, really. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The prices are too high for the farmers, and of course, they need simply to choose the product.
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah.
not DAP, it's urea, it's ammonium nitrate, anything that is immediately needed. Yeah.
And I think this is a really nice segue because, how to address that situation. Well, there is um, a party that has already kind of shown the way with that regard. How do you address really high phosphates prices? And, a new um, sort of way of dealing with this has been seen in Brazil, really, with the high MAP prices, which have remained remarkably stable for quite a while. But farmers are again, they have to deal with similar liquidity issues. And recently, we'll also be hearing again exchange rate issues, which are hampering demand and affordability. What did the Brazil farmers do? They're turning to SSB and to a lesser extent to TSB because they're just so much more affordable than traditional MAP. So, could we see a similar shift in other parts of the world, or perhaps even, dare I say it, America? But yeah, that is an interesting trend to see that if prices don't move, then farmers will be sort of looking at other products.
Right, right. You mentioned already Brazil, but Q4 in general for Brazil purchasing seemed to be quite active. Is that true? Because at least for nitrogen fertilizers, they set a record high of imports for 11 months. And
Yeah.
also, it was active in MAP, but how active to your evaluation comparably it was, for example, to the year ago?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not really my direct field of expertise, but as I understand it, potash and particularly ammonium nitrate were very active in Brazil. But with regards to MAP, we just didn't see really prices move all that much, and affordability really overall, as more of a rule, is a bit of an issue. Um, Going forward, I would expect to see once I get to bring in earlier parts of our discussions, one of the big suppliers is Morocco. They again shifting attention to TSB as part of an overall strategy to shift their attention to more finished products. Again, I'm seeing TSB not being as highly sought out after perhaps as much as perhaps SSB. So that's something to take into account, but it absolutely is an alternative to MAP prices, which just do not seem to be responding. They have been remarkably resilient and just staying very stable for a long time. Um, Again, Russia remaining the having the lion's share of the market, really, nothing really surprising there. Um, and product availability doesn't really seem to be that much of an issue. We haven't really seen the US kind of try to siphon much of the product yet. So the supply side is robust. It's just an issue of um, whether farmers will respond to it. And I've been very intrigued by the recent trend, and SSP prices are responding to this, by the way. We've seen a slight uptick recently. So, it goes to show that there is demand there. It's just affordability that can be hampering demand. So, someone could be seeing this and really deciding that where MAP prices to react to that, there would be, demand is really there.
Right, right. You already mentioned US. That was one more significant newsmaker in Q4, I would say, because
Definitely.
they were, for such a long time, they were looking at these duties for Moroccan and Russian product. And finally, in Q4, they have taken the decision, final decision. So with all this happening, how do you, first of all, maybe yeah, you can explain what in fact means this new level of tariffs for Moroccan and Russian products? Which products then will move to the US, and where will those Moroccan and Russian products go? What is your understanding?
Yeah, I feel like the first thing to really, if we're looking ahead, and this conversation is kind of like also a little bit forward looking, and by the time this gets to listeners, it will not be too far away from another elephant in the room, President-elect Donald Trump coming into office, who has, he's has this sort of strange idea about tariffs and this kind of it's something that comes up a lot when it comes to his sort of a proposed strategy for the future, and where there's some estimations that were those really to be implemented to the extent that he talks about, it would be quite a significant blow to trade, and one of the things this would trickle down to is the availability of product for sure. For example, we talk about Moroccan and Russian product, and rightfully so. But something that doesn't really come up is, if really President-elect does implement tariffs on imports from Mexico, then that would also have a very substantial effect for the phosphates market as well. So that is something to definitely keep an eye out for because I feel like it's something that isn't mentioned as much. So for listeners, this is definitely an interesting angle. But to answer your question for Moroccan product and Russian product, we did see tariffs again remaining a substantial factor for bringing product in, and again has limited availability in a very real way. Those tariffs in Q4, I have to say, the direction of what I was expecting was the other way. I was not expecting tariffs to remain substantially high, let alone to be increased. Um, and This again kind of combined with I've seen some market players in the US look with significant concern at what's happening also in China and that protectionism of of domestic demand, domestic availability, and say, listen, so if India's coming back to the market, China is out, what options does that leave us? We have seen some robust fill demand in New Orleans recently. There was significant activity uh, again. So it's such an interesting question to try to answer, but with regards to whether it looks um, optimistic for availability. I'm not so sure it's pointing to good availability in the US. I think there are some slight concerns um, for MAP and DAP. I would say that in recent weeks, the price differential between DAP and MAP, at least in New Orleans for barges, has been closer to what has been the historical trend. So, on some level, there is some return to the norm there. But what sort of how that translates going into Q1, that looks to be a significant obstacle again for securing product. Saudi Arabia has been again stepping up, as far as I can tell, to provide product to the US, and sort of seeing those windows of opportunity between Morocco and Russia. But the availability of Russian product in the US has been steadily declining. I don't see that as bouncing back at all. Moroccan product has been more resilient, as far as I can tell.
I see, I see. Thank you. So perhaps we will see more trade flows, differentiation in 2025. It will be interesting to watch those developments.
Absolutely.
Um,
I think, and very sorry to interrupt you, I would say, your point about Moroccan and Russian product is very, very valid. I am having a little bit of concern with the talk about tariffs coming in from the incoming administration, and that I could see that as having if we have this conversation again in next few quarters, we could be talking about the impact the tariffs are having and,
sure.
you know, dwarfing the current situation, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. We will watch this very, very closely, definitely in a quarter from now. One more thing that we discussed 3 months ago was your expectation that in Q4 the DEP production cost level will increase because major raw materials prices were increasing. Specifically, we had growth of ammonia price, which is still there, a new
Yep.
contract price of phosphoric acid to India, and it was indeed significantly higher versus previous level, and also a high and growing sulfur price. So I think that is also one of the factors why the price of DAP in general stayed at such high and elevated level. So what is your expectation in terms of these costs for Q1 and how it will influence, on top of what we already discussed for demand, how it will influence the general price situation in the market?
You're very right to point out that the production costs are significant right now and impacting production. That has not really, of course, capacity. We're seeing major producers reach new records of capacity year by year. So that is That is very good news indeed. And, new facilities coming online, th that in terms of finished product, that's very good. In terms of prices, that there are significant concerns about that. The price of ammonia, you rightly mentioned, is quite high. Sulfur, as well. Um, it's quite difficult to predict the price of raw materials going into Q1, but if there's anything to project into from the current situation with regards to the very substantial demand for finished products, I think it would be reasonable to assume that it could be not something that changes overnight. I would say I would expect production costs to remain at least part of the consideration with regards to finished product availability.
Right, indeed. So in general, it will be an interesting time again to watch.
It will be.
It will be. And I would like to thank you so much for this insightful discussion. And also, I want to thank you for support of Fertilizer Jazz during 2024. And I'm sure we'll have many more interesting discussions in 2025. And yes, indeed, we meet just before the end of the year. So I would like to wish you personally, your family, a lot of joint happiness, and ICIS, a lot of new projects, good clients, and a lot of development as well.
Absolutely, Maria. Thank you so much. Likewise. And, I have to say, this is a good place to mention how much we value your voice as part of the industry, really sort of highlighting voices from around the world. And I've learned a tremendous amount listening to your discussions, and it's just an invaluable project to be on. So thank you so much for doing it. Thank you so much for inviting me. I wish you and as well as the listeners a fantastic 2025. I'm so excited to be a part of this industry, to be speaking to these amazing, generous, insightful people that we get to talk to, and we're going to be here to cover all of it. Feel free to reach out at any point, and thank you so much for
Thank you.
inviting us to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. As usually, I will leave all credentials of Chris and ICIS in the comments. Also, please let me know in the comments which other hot questions related to phosphates market you are interested to uncover, and we will do so with Chris next time. Please subscribe to the channel, put like to this video, and see you soon.